fellow builders, and welcome back to Das Bench. Mediocre Modeler here. And we're in between on the Mandalorian build because we're waiting on the pistol belt to show up. So we really can't do anything until that gets going. But in the meantime, I figured we'd go on ahead and start on the next project. Now, when I think about sci-fi, there have to be some key things in there to hook me. You have to have a cool dynamic character, he has to have a cool vehicle, and he has to have an iconic weapon. We're going to focus on just the weapons because the weapons are iconic, and we all know them. Star Trek, you had the phaser. Galactica, you had the laser pistol, which I used to call it a blaster, but I was summarily chastised on the Battlestar Galactica group for that. Thanks, guys. In a good way. I'm just kidding. But then, for Star Wars, you've got several. You've got the DL-44. You've got the DL-44 Han Solo's blaster. You've got Boba Fett's blaster. You've got the bowcaster, and let's not forget the lightsaber. When these things come along, they kind of change the face of sci-fi weapons to follow, and this weapon is no different. It's the Aliens pulse rifle, the M41A Aliens pulse rifle, and you can plainly see how once this thing came out, it changed the face of sci-fi weapons. Everything after it. You look at the Halo weapons, look at just even today, you look at some of the designs and you can trace that back to the M41 Aliens pulse rifle. Now, the Aliens pulse rifle was the brainchild of James Cameron, and it was comprised of a couple of different components. The main body is the M1A1 Thompson. That's right, the Tommy gun. And no self-respecting gangster was ever seen without his barrel-shaped Tommy gun. But it also crept into sci-fi. You saw in Star Trek, I think the episode was A Piece of the Action with Kirk, and he's got the machine gun. There was the episode, it was one of the it was a Star Trek movie where the First Contact, I do believe, and you've got Picard on the holodeck, and he's got the Tommy gun. So that's the main base. It also had below it, which we were using as the shotgun portion of it, was a Remington 870 shotgun. But it didn't look like the shotgun because it was wrapped in a Spaz 12 heat shield. Okay? And then you had some other pieces of metal or whatever shaped around it to make it look all sci-fi. And it did look sci-fi. And it's a beautiful thing. Model makers lost their minds making these things, coming up with the components. When I made mine, I started with an airsoft gun as the base, and I had bought a resin kit for like all the rest of them, and I kind of piecemealed it together. There, if you check YouTube, you can see where people actually made real ones out there. But for the purpose of our conversation, we're in the 3D world. And so with these pieces, I wasn't sure about how well this was modeled. So this was the first piece I printed. I figure if they can get this piece right, then pretty much the rest of it is either close enough or rescuable. And I was really concerned about the size and the whole 9 yards. This came out really well. Now here's something that I wish someone would have told me about 3D printing before I got started, because I'm on that journey. I'm learning as I go. You always have to, when it comes to printing, figure out where your bad side's going to be. Now, this has good components all over it, so all these sides need to look good. You've got the key on top, so the only side that had to be possibly sacrificed was the bottom. Let me show you what I mean. So once I'm in my slicing program, I go to the folder and pick the piece that I want to print. So when I originally started doing this, I just assumed it laid itself on the surface the way you were supposed to print it. And it took me a while to figure out that that wasn't necessarily the case. So if I printed it like this bottom side would be my bad side. And so what you end up having to do is rotating it. And so now what you're going to have is it's going to print a raft around the bottom of it and print this straight up. And it came out really well. So that's what I mean by you always have to figure out what side you're going to want to sacrifice or work on. The biggest problem you always have is at the beginning of the print trying to make sure that your part sticks to the top surface, the glass, whatever. You can use things like Aquanet or what. There's just so many different things that you can try to get that. I was listening to a YouTube video where a guy didn't use the raft, and what the raft is, it lays down a layer of plastic first on the glass, and then it starts printing your piece on top of it. So that helps clean the nozzle out. That way you don't have any schmutz in there. And then by the time it gives your piece something to print on top of. So if this is adhered to your surface, this prints on top of it. Okay. Now the problem you end up having is when you have halves, because that part right there has to come together. So what you end up doing is sanding down this portion so that your alignment pegs are the right width apart, because on this one here you've got half pegs. So the problem there is you have to, before you glue this together, you have to make sure it's aligned in all planes. And that can be a little bit difficult. If you're lucky, you won't have a whole lot of half pieces. I've got maybe 6. But to start with, it's nice when you have 2 pieces that go together. It's just beautiful. You put them together and you just kind of push them together, and you're good. That's you're off and running. The first part of this is done. Now this was 2 separate pieces that I glued together and aligned and put them together. You got that, this goes here, and this is starting to look like something. Then you take this piece, you get that lined, you're starting to get a gut. Let's get some of these pieces lined up and glued together. We're just going to use some accelerator and the regular CA glue. That should do it for us. Now these pieces have already been sanded down to where I know what I was doing. I sanded them down to the point where they should be real close, and then I was using the whole key on these to test it, to make sure. Actually that one went to this one, so I just kept test fitting it to make sure there was clearance. So let's get some of these pieces glued. If you're lucky, you can have a piece like this where you've got a flat on the top and a flat on the bottom. That way you can just clamp it together and kind of roughly get your alignment going. And once you've got it where you think you need to be, you can just start putting your glue down. Again, you also need to be thinking about what surfaces are going to be exposed and what aren't. So if there's a key there, you're going to have these are going to be mating to something. So I would put extra glue in the key and on the surface area to help hold this thing together. Some of the gaps are fairly big, so get you some glue down in your gaps, hit it with your kicker, and then you could go back with your putty and fill it in. But let's get some stuff glued just to make ourselves feel better. I think I'm gonna print some more of these because that right there is the base for a really cool sci-fi weapon, a whole different line of weapons. There's a gun. There's, you know, do something like that. Matter of fact, I already did something like that with my old resin kit. So this is the bottom portion of it. This is the grenade launcher portion of it. It's fast 12. This is the handle. That's like a plumbing piece that I found that just looked great for a nozzle. Gives it a little bit of legitimacy, and just that right there to fill in that butt piece. That right there is the back end of an AT-AT. So you just got to be creative with it. Only problem is this thing is resin and it's heavy. So the nice thing, a little bit heavy with the glue there. Not very happy with that, but you can always sand it back. The one nice thing about the 3D print layers, since it prints in layers, you get kind of like a crisscross pattern, which gives you a place for the glue to bite. That's a real good thing. I need to refer back to the pictures and do some sanding because I can't remember where all these pieces go. think that's all I can do for the moment. I need to go double check my piece count, because there should be 20 pieces. And I know I duplicated the laying over thing. When I printed this, I printed it on its side, and then I went back, and because I didn't want to do all that sanding, I'm like, well, you know what, let me see if I can print that vertically. I was concerned that I wasn't going to be able to print these holes right, and it did a great job. The only bad part on here is the end, and this is going to be gluing to another piece, which I can glue this one and get this all glued up. But since there's not much else to look at, I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. I've been relieved. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and tell a friend, tell a buddy, hey, I found this modeling guy. Have a modeling day. But until then, have fun, be safe, and go build something. And we'll see you next time. Pew 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 pew.